Hey everybody, welcome back to the Overwatch channel. I know I haven't made a video in a while, but I've been busy and I've also been doing a lot of research and trying to think about how to make this next video that I'm making right now. So basically I come to the conclusion that if you have a certain mindset, nothing I say here will matter because I really can't even find a label for myself because I don't quite fit into any group that I can find, except for a very small number of people on the internet that I would say I agree with on philosophy of reality and life. So I had a couple of book suggestions for people interested in doing research into this type of stuff, into trying to figure out how things really work and why we're here, and answering all those philosophical questions that some of us have and some of us don't give a crap about. And some of us have a premise that they believe, and they'll defend that premise no matter what evidence comes their way to counters that. So let me go over some of these interesting books first. So I would suggest that the first book, and this is in no particular order, but the first book I would recommend here, and is a book that kind of gives a general view into the death experience, and that is Glimpsing Heaven by Judy Bachrach. She's a journalist who started out as a skeptic, did research, and wrote this book. And it contains many cases that you can then further look into. And if you're a person that's like an atheist that doesn't believe in the afterlife, you have to then rationalize away certain events that have happened, that have been recorded in scientific environments, that are not explainable in the reductionist materialist view. So that's one book. Proof of Heaven by Evan Alexander. Some of these are audiobooks because I have to drive a lot sometimes for work. So I do listen to more books than I can actually read because it's more convenient for me. And this book I've actually listened to twice, and I've looked into Evan Alexander's life. He's also written another book, The Map of Heaven, which is also like a follow-up to this Proof of Heaven. Evan Alexander is a great case because first of all, he starts out as an atheist. A lot of these near-death experiencers, when they're not atheists anymore, when they come back. The thing is that I don't think that, for me, religions don't explain everything. Religion, I think, is an interpretation that is politically corrupted by people, and then it tries to sort of give us this view of the universe and God that fits their dogma. Whereas atheists, I think some of them anyway, have rejected a religion for some logical reason, and then instead of saying, well, just because that religion is wrong doesn't mean that there's other things going on that I don't understand, they kind of blanket just drop the whole spiritual thing, and that doesn't describe me at all. I'm not a deist because I believe in that the supernatural, or I don't want to use the word supernatural because I think it's all natural. The higher dimensional planes and certain things, healings, what people call miracles, or in some other belief systems they would call it magic. These things happen, so I do believe in like a revelation of our higher selves and our higher dimensional existence, and God and heaven and all that stuff. So I'm not really a deist. I'm not a New Ager because I think that's all fluff and nonsense. I don't fit into any religion because I think they all have something wrong, and I'm definitely not an atheist because I believe that life continues after death. And I believe that because of the scientists that are like the Galileos of today, being scoffed and mocked as they push forward and try to show case after case There's something going on here, and just because we can't measure it today doesn't mean we shouldn't pour funding and effort into trying to understand it. Just like 500 or 1,000 years ago, there was no way for humans to measure and look at, say, infrared or ultraviolet light, even though it still existed, even though you couldn't see it, right? So there are things that we just don't understand, and I'm not claiming to give you any answers per se. I'm just saying that there's things that we need to look into that don't fit anything. This is another great book from a nurse who later became a doctor, Dr. Penny Sartori. Really fascinating case that she was personally involved with, where a 60-year-old man had a complete healing of a hand disfiguration that he had since he was 9 years old. That was medically documented. Excellent book. It goes into all kinds of other cases. She's a very good writer. Supernormal. Dr. Dean Radin, experiments for the Noetic Institute. Maybe you don't think noetic science is science, and it's bleeding edge science. That's why I look at it. There are experiments that they have done that skeptical scientists have replicated. So to say that Dr. Dean Radin is improving things is just dismissive, and a lot of atheists like to just dismiss things that counter their beliefs. Apocalypse Not. This is an excellent book that I'm about 3/4 of the way through now. If you are feeling dreary from watching channels that predict our doom and try to interpret the book of Revelation, and I think this is the first thing that fell apart for me. The book of Revelation, okay, maybe I should back up a little bit. I grew up Catholic, but never really bought into that whole thing. Although I did have a lot of guilty feelings because they put that into your psyche, especially if you go to Catholic school from kindergarten on to 12th grade, like I did. I grew up Catholic, so I always considered myself at least Christian. And then I finally had time about 2 years ago to really start looking into this stuff, and I read the Bible, 2 different versions, cover to cover, and I listened to audiobooks of the Bible. I've read variations of other texts like the Septuagint. I've done a lot of research into that, and I was shocked because the first thing that I realized, I guess because subconsciously you're given, if you're Christian, you're giving you have like a subconscious, I don't want to say suggestion, but I don't know how else to say it. The suggestions that your subconscious take in is what you hear over and over again, which is God is all loving, He's all omnipotent, the Bible is inerrant. So as you're reading the Bible, I was kind of shocked that I had blocked out certain things that are just logically you just can't explain, or atrocities that are in the Bible that just don't fit the definition that Christians have of their all-loving God. So what I think the first thing that I started to have trouble with was that simple phrase, that God says He's a jealous God, which jealousy is an emotion of insecurity. And I think logically I started to have a problem with that, because you're talking about the being here, or the entity, or whatever it is that people perceive as that light in the death experience, where that they're in the presence of this all-loving force that many near-death experiencers come back with. That creation force is the author of the code of DNA, the author of the reality that we see, which more and more seems like it's a simulation here, but this author would be jealous, would be insecure about anything. That was a logical problem, and that one I kind of put aside for a while. It was the book of Revelation when that finally crumbled for me. And this is why I believe a lot of Christians need that Bible be inerrant, cover to cover, because if a small piece of it starts to fall apart, for me, once that book of Revelation fell apart, once I took it apart, historically researched where it came from, the trouble it had being in the canon. The book Apocalypse is one good source to start out with if you want to deconstruct the apocalypse meme and just how many times it's been played out throughout history. I did not know about the Seventh-day Adventist Church and how they basically botched their own apocalypse prediction in the 1840s. I mean, it just goes on and on. It's a repeating cycle, constantly repeating itself. And the book of Revelation is simply not prophecy. It's simply not, if you look at it honestly. And I know a lot of Christians out there are going to have a blow a gasket at that. At the same time, like I said, I can't fit into any label because, I'm not an atheist. I believe in an afterlife. I believe that consciousness goes on, and I certainly don't believe in that new fluff, new age crap. So anyway, if you do read the Bible several times, this guy isn't a professional author, I would say, because there's some grammatical stuff in his book that it looks like he may have didn't have a professional editor, but still a great book that has great list of facts in there. He hasn't updated his website in a while, the debunkingskeptics.com. There are two great books that he has written that make you really see things in more perspective. Debunking Pseudo-Skeptical Arguments of Paranormal Debunkers. This book here really takes apart the atheist or the James Randys, and just, the people that really want to be skeptical should be skeptical, including of their own beliefs. But instead, these people are just skeptical of things they don't want to be true. So that's one thing. Debunking Christian circular arguments and assumptions. I read this book cover to cover, and it was everything that was troubling me is chronicled in this book. And when you cross-reference what he's talking about and go back to the Bible and read it in either whatever translation you like, this is a very disturbing process to go through, especially if you're from a Christian perspective, because this could destroy a lot of things for you. But it was the near-death experience, witnesses, the witnesses of death that we actually have today. There's so many cases that are simply not explainable. And when you listen to skeptics, a great place to listen to them interviewed in a fair way is on Skeptico, where they're allowed to speak and give out our best arguments. And there's all kinds of awesome interviews on this website. The Skeptico website, and I try to listen to things like a trier of fact, like a judge, like a juror. From my law enforcement experience, I try to listen to things and look at things like an investigator. And the troubling thing I have is some of these, I forget which show it was, but there was a guy on there, and he seemed very intelligent, and he was giving his best skeptical arguments against life after death. And then when the interviewer, Alex, gives throws out some scientific information to him, it's not that he doesn't look at the science. It's that he says, this person that was being interviewed, and I can't remember which show it was now, but he basically says, well, I don't know about that, but it doesn't seem relevant to me, so I'm going to dismiss it. So, and that happens a lot. When you see people that are skeptical about something and they're given evidence that shows that they're being skeptical for a bad reason, or that there's evidence that suggests that their premise is wrong about something, they tend to dismiss it. It's just irrelevant. I stopped dismissing things that were bothering me, and eventually Alex here on Skeptico is one of the few people that I agree with most of the time. On my channel, I have a lot of playlists, and if you watch my earlier videos, you see I had quite a different perspective on things. But I did link to, and I'm a big fan of Gary Habermas. He is a Christian apologist who has done tremendous amount of research. But even there was something that was bothering me, and that was the fact that in order for Habermas to make his case, and what he does is he kind of narrowly focuses on a very, very small historical portion of the Bible, and that's during the time of Jesus was on earth and his death and resurrection. He never deviates and actually concedes to anybody he's debating any other issues. And I started to think about that as a problem, because in that case he's sort of, without doing so, admitting that it's possible that the 90% of the Bible is wrong then, because he's not even going to go there. He's just focusing on one particular event. And the anti-Gary Habermas would be this guy, Robert Price. He's about as intelligent, I think, as Gary Habermas, and he was also an author and a former Christian preacher. But as far as Bible inerrancy, I don't want to kind of bouncing around here, but I'm trying to cover like a broad spectrum of everything. Bible inerrancy is a problem that I think, I'm going to play a small clip now from William Lane Craig. He's the guy who's debated people like Hitchens, and he's quite articulate, but I want you to pay very close attention. This is what I'm talking about, looking at things and parsing what people say and being very careful at listening to what people are saying. Listen to this few-minute clip here from this interview with Craig.
For now, God calls them back out to the promised land to give it to them again, but that means wiping out these peoples that are already living there.
Right off the bat, it seems to go against the grain of our modern sensibilities.
Oh, yeah, I certainly think so, because we have in modern warfare a distinction between civilians and combatants, and it seems morally atrocious to kill these women and children who are non-combatants. And so it does present, I think, a real difficulty for the Christian in reading these narratives. Especially, as I say, what's odd is that it's so different from God as you read about him in the rest of the Old Testament, where he's compassionate toward those who are suffering, the downtrodden, the oppressed. He's fair in dealing with other people. He even loves pagan nations. I mean, one of the most remarkable stories in the Old Testament is the story of Jonah, where God sends a prophet to Nineveh, this pagan nation, because he says there are a couple of 100,000 people there who don't know their right hand from their left, and I have pity upon these people. So he sends a prophet to them, even though they're not even Israelites. And so it's so strange to see this narrative in the conquest of Canaan of this same God who is so compassionate and loving and just, ordering these Israeli soldiers to annihilate these people groups in Canaan.
One thing that emerges from this question is that it's an internal question. The question, as the skeptic usually presents it against the Christian, is, why would God do this? And you immediately think, well, wait a minute, if it were God who were doing this, we're talking about the God of the universe here. So it becomes an internal question of why God would do this, as opposed to, is there a God who did this?
Exactly. I think that's right, Kevin. And if you ask yourself, suppose this objection is unanswerable. Suppose the skeptic is able to demonstrate to our satisfaction that an all-loving, all-just God could not have issued such a command. What follows from that? That Christ didn't rise from the dead? That Jesus Christ was not God incarnate? That God does not exist? Well, no, obviously none of that would follow. All that would follow is that God, in fact, did not give such a command, as you have recorded in the book of Genesis. Now, that would mean either these stories are simply legends, perhaps myths of the founding of Israel that never really occurred, or else, if these events did occur, then Israel, carried away in a fit of national frenzy, thought God is on our side, and so they imagined that God had commanded them to do these things.
You see there, when pressed, people do tend to reveal the truth. Now, this is a Christian apologist who has just veered into basically admitting that there's not inerrancy in the Bible. There is problems with it, right? So the list that you go through in on this author's Winston Wu's books here, debunking. This is a gigantic list in here of atrocities that eventually, some of them just cannot be explained away if you're honest with yourself. So there are issues. So if you're trying to predict the future with the Book of Revelation, I would say take a look at Apocalypse Not. Look at some of this stuff. Robert Price here, I believe at this point in the interview, he was explaining the dogma and the irrationalness of when he kind of sort of self-identifies as an atheist now. Like I said, he's the anti-Gary Habermas, but when pressed, he actually admits he's more of an agnostic and a person that doesn't know. For me, see, I can't even fit into that category because I don't claim that I don't know. I claim that there's sufficient evidence and data to suggest that when people die, their consciousness goes on. That there's scientific data and evidence that supports that premise of mine, and that if you go into in-depth studies with material like from the Division of Perceptual Studies from the University of Virginia School of Medicine, and read some of these books and look at some of these interviews and research papers that these people have published, you have to be really dense not to get some of this stuff, not to understand what's really going on here. So, and what am I really saying? Okay, so I don't know why we're here. I don't know that there's no reincarnation, because there are some cases that are profound that suggest that reincarnation may happen. I don't believe that reincarnation happens to everyone. I don't have any sense that I ever lived before. I also don't have any desire to come back to this reality based on what I can garner that awaits us after this. I don't have any fear of this dogmatic religion that says I have to do X, Y, and Z, or I'm going to burn in hell for the rest of eternity. I don't believe in Christianity per se at all, because the fact is that which version do you believe in? They can't even agree amongst themselves. Pre-trib, post-trib, hell is forever, hell isn't forever. And when you look into the history of all this, you see our brains have contaminated what our minds could possibly perceive as the truth by introducing premises and dogmas and all this other stuff. I think atheists are dense and quite angry people that just have an issue with religion, and then have conflated that with a issue with God that may have nothing to do with any religion. I don't know why there's suffering and pain and evil in the world, but I suspect that it may be a necessity, something that's needed before we can ascend. We have to experience this for some reason. I think it's unnecessary that if people were to realize that there is something that interconnects us all and that there is this absolute love beyond life, I don't think we would be doing as much evil and pain and suffering to each other. Religions have and do cause people to kill and do all kinds of nasty, terrible things to one another. So, I'm not sure what else I could say in this video, except that look up some of this stuff. I'm not putting any of these links on the bottom. I've done all this work myself. You want to know what's really going on? You got to do the hard work. Got to research. Got to read. Got to listen. And frankly, I don't really watch or look at the comments below my videos anymore, because trolls annoy me, and I'm not going to answer them anyway, and I don't care to see what they say. So if you're a troll and you're making comments, there's a very good chance I'm not going to even read it. So have fun with your comments if you want below. You can all interact with each other, but that's about it. Look, you use Google. You start searching. You can see the websites here. Do your own work. That's how I did it. You have to really be willing to look at this stuff. And if you're not willing to look at it, me putting links at the bottom is just wasting time because you're not going to look at it anyway. So, the truth is out there, but what is the truth? See you guys next time.